It began not with thunder, but with a whisper of dread. The sun blazed above a crowded village market, heat shimmering on cobblestones. Among the bustle, an old monk with eyes like fog and limbs like trembling reeds shuffled through the crowd. Just steps away, a teenage boy named Jun clutched a satchel of groceries, weaving between stalls. Then, it happened. The monk's body jerked, knees buckled, and his cane clattered to the stone. A scream tore the air. Jun dropped his bag, fruit scattered, people gasped. He rushed to the old man's side, breath caught in panic. "Sir," he whispered. The monk's eyes fluttered, then locked onto Jun with piercing force. He gripped Jun's wrist and said, "Never carry what isn't yours. It rots the soul." The words burrowed deep. Before Jun could ask, the monk's hand fell limp. Around them, silence bloomed. The crowd stared. But Jun heard only that sentence echoing, haunting, alive. That day cracked something in him. And nothing would be the same. Jun didn't sleep. The monk's words echoed through every hour of the night. Never carry what isn't yours. What did that even mean? He replayed the collapse, the grip, the stare. And then, the voice. It hadn't sounded like a warning, it had felt like a command. In the quiet hours before dawn, Jun sat on his bed, staring out the window. The alley he hadn't walked through in years called to him. That narrow gap of silence held a truth he had buried. He didn't understand how he knew, but he did. His chest felt tight. He could still hear the sound of his mother crying behind closed doors, his brother's footsteps the night he left. Jun whispered the words again, slower this time. "Never carry what isn't yours." Outside, the alley waited. Inside, Jun's shame began to shift. The alley smelled of mildew and silence. As Jun stepped into its shadowed mouth, it felt like walking into a memory he had tried to forget. Walls narrowed, light faded. Every step whispered, "Remember." At the far end, behind rotted boards, lay the place where he had hidden the notebook. His father's notebook. He had taken it the night everything shattered, the night shouting turned to bruises and silence settled in like dust. He was 8. He had believed he was saving something, but all he had done was bury it. His hand hovered over the boards. "Is this what I'm carrying?" he whispered. The words weren't just his, they belonged to that frightened boy from long ago. And the boy had waited long enough. With a creak and a snap, the boards gave way. Dust puffed like breath as Jun reached inside. His hand found the notebook instantly, as if it had waited for his touch. Leather cracked, pages swollen from time. He knelt and opened it with trembling fingers. The ink was faint, but the words screamed. "I never wanted to hurt them. I only wanted to be seen." Jun's breath caught. His father had never been a monster. He had been a boy too, just older, just angrier. The notebook wasn't just confession. It was inheritance. And Jun had carried his father's shame like it was his own. But it never was. Tears fell silently as the burden uncoiled from his chest. The monk hadn't warned him. He had freed him. Jun walked home as dawn painted the sky in rose and amber. His legs felt lighter, as if something had been lifted off his back. He saw his house from down the road. The sagging roof, the porch with peeling paint, the woman on the steps watering her plants. His mother. She turned as he approached. Their eyes met, and in that moment she knew. Not everything, but enough. Jun offered a tired smile. "I think I'm ready to talk now," he said softly. Her watering can trembled. She set it down and opened her arms. No speeches. No questions. Just silence. And for the first time, that silence felt warm. Jun sat at the kitchen table, the old notebook between him and his mother. Steam curled from a pot of rice, untouched. He had read some of it aloud. Just enough. She hadn't cried, but her hands trembled. "He was never cruel with his fists," she said quietly. "But silence, that was his weapon. It made us invisible." June nodded, absorbing the ache in her voice. I used to think if I was better, louder, smarter, he'd see me, he said. His mother looked away. He saw you. He just couldn't face what you reminded him of. June blinked. And what was that? She met his eyes. Hope. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then June reached across the table, took her hand, and for the first time in years, she didn't flinch. The weight between them began to lift, word by word, breath by breath. Later that day, June stood outside his older brother's apartment building, heart thudding against his ribs. The last time they spoke, it ended in slammed doors and silence. He remembered yelling, "You left us," and his brother replying, "I had to survive." That echo still lived in June's bones. But now, with the notebook clutched tightly, he wasn't looking for an apology. He was looking for truth. He rang the bell. Footsteps. A click. The door opened, and there he was. Older, tired, but familiar. "June," he said. June held out the notebook. "It's his. I think we both deserve to read it." The brother hesitated, eyes flicking between June and the book. "You came all this way?" June nodded. "He broke us, but we're the ones still here." Silence stretched. Then the brother stepped aside. "Come in." They sat in silence for what felt like an hour. The notebook lay on the coffee table, untouched. June's brother lit a cigarette, but didn't smoke it. "He hit me once," he said at last. "I was 13, told me I'd never be a man, that I was too soft." June's chest tightened. "He never hit me," he replied. "But he didn't talk to me either, not for weeks." His brother chuckled darkly. "Guess he had 2 sons, and didn't know how to love either." They stared at the floor, the shame no longer alone. Then June reached for the notebook, opened it to a blank page and said, "What if we wrote our own ending?" His brother looked up. "What do you mean?" June met his gaze. "I mean, we stop carrying him, and start carrying each other." They began to read the notebook aloud, one entry at a time. Regrets, broken promises, desperate pleas. Their father had been many things, proud, bitter, scared. But beneath it all, he had been lonely. June's brother read an unfinished letter. "To my sons, I don't know how to give you what I never had." The words struck like a storm. Tears came, not with shame, but release. "He was drowning," June whispered. "And he didn't know how to ask for help." His brother wiped his eyes. "And we drowned with him." But they didn't stop reading. Each page was a wound, but also a stitch. By the end, the notebook wasn't their father's anymore. It was theirs. A record of pain, yes, but also survival. They had walked through fire. Together. Before leaving, June placed the notebook back in his satchel. It felt lighter now, not like a burden, but a shared story. His brother hugged him at the door. No words, just grip. As June walked back into the street, the sky was beginning to darken, painted in shades of orange and steel. The wind was cooler. A whisper in his chest reminded him of the monk. That frail hand. That warning. Never carry what isn't yours. June smiled gently. He had misunderstood. It wasn't about running away from pain. It was about refusing to inherit what should have been healed. His story wasn't a shadow anymore. It was a path. And for the first time he was walking it by choice, not out of fear, not out of duty, but for himself. June returned to the monastery where it all began. The monk, they said, was still resting, too weak to speak, too tired to move. But June didn't come for answers anymore. He came to sit, to witness. He stepped quietly into the small stone meditation hall. The monk lay curled on a floor mat, eyes shut, breath shallow. June knelt beside him, pulling the notebook from his satchel. "You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost," he said softly. "And I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but thank you." The monk stirred, barely. A flicker of movement in his eyelids. June placed the notebook beside him. Not as a return. As a gift. Then, with a bow so deep it shook his spine, Jun turned and left, leaving behind not the book, but the burden. Outside, June sat beneath a gnarled tree, whose roots coiled like veins. A young novice monk approached, no older than 12, eyes wide with curiosity. "Did he speak to you?" the boy asked. June smiled. "He said something once. I didn't understand it then." The boy sat beside him. "Master says, silence is a kind of teaching." June nodded slowly. "He teaches without needing words." They both watched the wind rustle through the tree's leaves. "What did he say?" the boy asked. June paused. "He said, never carry what isn't yours." The boy frowned. "What does that mean?" June looked at the branches above. "It means we don't have to inherit the pain that others left behind. We can choose what we carry." The boy whispered, "Even if it's our family?" June's voice softened. "Especially then." That night, June walked the temple grounds under a moon that seemed brighter than usual. Lanterns flickered along the path like quiet sentinels. He found a small bell tower and climbed to its wooden platform. The wind there whispered in voices he used to silence. His father's, his brother's, his own. June didn't push them away. He listened, and in listening, they softened. They weren't demands. They were echoes. He sat there until morning light touched the mountains. The monk's words still lived in him, but they had changed form. They weren't warnings now. They were reminders. June understood, pain doesn't disappear. It transforms. If we let it. And that transformation begins in stillness, in choice, in letting go. The next morning, June helped tend a temple garden. Fingers in soil, sweat on his brow, he moved silently alongside others. A woman, middle-aged and solemn, handed him a spade. "You're the one who saw the old master collapse," she said. June nodded. "He saw me too," he replied. She smiled faintly. "He always sees what people hide." They dug in silence. The earth was thick and stubborn. June struck a root and paused. "What if it's too deep?" he asked. The woman looked at him. "Then you work slowly, gently. You don't rip it out, you coax it free." June didn't know if she meant the root or something else. Maybe both. So he dug slower, with care. That day, he learned healing doesn't arrive like lightning. It grows, like seeds in bruised soil. Before he left, the novice boy found June again. "Will you come back?" he asked. June smiled. "I think I never really left." The boy looked puzzled. "But you're going." June nodded. "Yes, but some things, some truths, they stay with you, even when you move on." The boy held something out, an old prayer bead bracelet. "He gave it to me when I first arrived," he said. "I think you need it now." June accepted it, fingers curling around the smooth beads. "Thank you," he whispered. As he walked down the stone path away from the monastery, the morning sun warmed his back. He no longer walked as someone running from a past. He walked as someone carrying wisdom, not weight. And that, he finally understood, was the difference. June returned to the village after nearly a week away. The streets looked the same, but something inside him was different. He stopped in front of his childhood home, hesitating. His mother greeted him at the door, eyes scanning him like a puzzle she was afraid to solve. "You look taller," she whispered. "I feel lighter," he replied. Inside, the silence wasn't cold anymore. It was open, inviting. He placed the prayer beads on the shelf beside an old family photo. "Where'd those come from?" his mother asked. June didn't explain. Instead, he looked at the photo, his younger self smiling between his parents, unaware of the storms to come. "I want to fix this place," he said. "Not just the walls. Us." She stared at him, then simply nodded. No conditions. Just a mother finally being seen by her son. The next day, June began cleaning the house, truly cleaning. He cleared the attic, swept under beds, opened long-sealed boxes. Dust danced in beams of sunlight like ghosts fleeing the corners. Ouch. In one box, he found a cassette tape labeled, "For When You're Older." His hands trembled as he slid it into the old player. A crackling voice filled the room. His father's. "If you're hearing this, I'm probably not around. I'm sorry, I thought silence would protect you. I was wrong. I didn't know how to love out loud." June sank to the floor. Tears didn't erupt. They streamed slowly, quietly. He let every word etch itself into him. It wasn't forgiveness yet. But it was the first time his father ever said, "I'm sorry." And it was enough for now. The tape changed something. That night, June cooked dinner. Really cooked, not instant packets or leftover rice. He set the table with care. Cloth napkins, warm bowls, and a small vase of garden flowers. His mother sat across from him, eyebrows raised in amused surprise. "Since when do you cook?" she teased. June shrugged, ladling soup into her bowl. "Since I realized we deserve better." She took a bite. Her eyes watered, but not from spice. "He made this once," she whispered. "When you were born." The air stilled. June looked at her, finally seeing her not just as a mother, but as a woman who once hoped, once hurt, and still stood. "Maybe we bring the good parts back," he said. "Just the good ones." She nodded, and this time smiled without sadness. June visited his father's grave the next morning. The cemetery was quiet, the air thick with dew. He knelt at the worn headstone, brushing away fallen leaves. "I hated you for a long time," he said softly. "But maybe I didn't know you. Maybe no one did." He pulled the prayer beads from his pocket and placed them on the stone. "I'm done carrying what you couldn't." Wind stirred the trees gently, almost as if in reply. June stayed there a while, not praying, not weeping, just breathing, just being. By the time he rose to leave, the weight in his chest had loosened. Not vanished, but lighter. His story no longer needed to fight his father's shadow. It could finally grow in its own light. That night, June stood by his bedroom window again, older, quieter, and somehow newer. The alley no longer pulled at him. It had given up its ghosts. He turned from the window and pulled out a blank notebook. Not his father's. His. He wrote the first sentence, "I am not what hurt me." Then another, "But I remember." He filled pages until the sun rose. Stories about his mother, his brother, the monk. About fear and love, silence and truth. He didn't write to be heard. He wrote to release. And as he wrote, he smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. This wasn't the end. This was the root. And he finally had the soil to grow. A week passed. Then another. June found a rhythm. Mornings in the garden, afternoons helping neighbors repair roofs or fix fences. No grand gestures, just quiet presence. One afternoon, a neighbor, Mr. Hayato, approached him with a wary expression. "I heard you've changed," he said. June wiped his hands on his shirt. "Maybe I just stopped hiding." Hayato looked away. "He was hard on you, your father." June nodded. "He was hard on himself too." The man lowered his gaze. "Mine too. We never talk about it." June didn't offer advice. Instead, he handed him a small hammer. "Want to help me finish this fence?" The man paused, then took the hammer. Sometimes healing didn't roar. It knocked quietly, like two men repairing something that wasn't broken in wood, but in memory. Later that evening, June visited the old schoolhouse. The chalkboards were blank, the windows smudged. It had been years since he stepped foot inside. A new teacher had arrived recently, a young woman named Aiko, full of fire and softness. "I heard you're the boy with the notebook," she teased when he entered. "I guess I am." June smiled. She showed him the reading list. Stories about war, love, resilience. They need to know pain isn't shameful, she said. June nodded, and that it doesn't belong to them unless they choose to hold it. Aiko's gaze lingered. You should speak here. Tell them what you've lived. June hesitated. What if they don't listen? Aiko replied, they will. Not because you're loud, but because you're honest. That night June agreed, for the first time, to be heard. The following week, June stood before a dozen students. His hands trembled behind the podium, not from fear, but from the weight of telling the truth. He didn't read from notes. He just spoke. My name is John, he began, and I used to think silence was strength, that carrying everyone else's pain made me good. He paused. The room didn't move, but silence nearly broke me, and the pain wasn't mine to carry. Eyes widened. Some nodded. One girl began to cry. June told them about the monk, about the notebook, about choosing to release what wasn't his. When he finished, no one clapped. Instead, one student raised a hand. How do you know what to keep and what to let go? June smiled. You'll listen, not to them, to you. And that was enough. News of June's story spread quietly, but steadily. Not gossip, gratitude. People began showing up at his door. A widow with unopened letters. A boy afraid to speak his father's name. An elder who hadn't forgiven herself in 40 years. June didn't offer miracles. He offered space. A place to be heard without judgment. He kept a wooden bench outside the gate. People called it the bench of burdens. They came, they sat, they spoke. Some left tears. Others left silence. But all left lighter. And Jun? He just listened. No monk's robe. No title. Just a young man who once carried what wasn't his, and learned to let it go. That bench became more than wood. It became a place where silence wasn't feared. It was honored. One evening, as the sun dipped low, June sat on the bench alone. The world was quiet, not heavy, not hollow, just still. He held his own journal now, half filled with stories and letters he'd never send. His mother stepped out, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed him one and sat beside him. No words. Just breath, just warmth. You changed things, she said after a long pause. June shook his head. I just stopped, pretending nothing was broken. She took a sip. That's how things begin to mend. They watched the sky darken together. And when the first star blinked above the rooftops, June spoke softly. I think I'm ready to forgive him. His mother didn't ask who. She didn't need to. She simply reached for his hand. The village held a memorial that summer. Not for someone who had just passed, but for those they had never truly mourned. June stood beside the old monk's pupil, now a young man with steady eyes and quiet strength. He passed peacefully, the student said. 3 days ago. June bowed his head. He never told me his name. The pupil smiled. He believed names were less important than actions. A small shrine was placed at the temple's entrance, flowers, incense, and a single folded robe. June stepped forward, placed the prayer beads atop it. He saw me, he whispered, when I didn't see myself. Villagers lit candles, shared silence. Some cried, others simply bowed. And June knew, some souls teach not through lessons, but through presence. The monk had done both, and now he rested. Days after the memorial, June was asked to speak at the temple again, not as a monk, not as a teacher, just as himself. He stood on the same steps where he'd once arrived broken. We all inherit something, he told the crowd. But not everything inherited must be kept. He paused, scanning their faces, young, old, weary, hopeful. You are allowed to let go. You are allowed to say this pain is not mine. A breeze stirred. Someone whispered, Amen. June smiled. And when you do choose what to carry, make sure it helps you walk upright, not bow your spine. The people didn't cheer. They simply breathed deeper. Because some truths don't ask to be celebrated. They ask to be lived. Later that evening, June returned to the tree where he once sat with the young monk. The novice, now older, awaited him there. Taller, quieter, wiser. "Do you still hear his voice?" he asked. June sat beside him. "I do, but it's softer now. Less like an order. More like a reminder." They sat in the shade, eyes tracking the rustling leaves above. "I was angry when he left," the novice confessed. "I felt abandoned." June nodded. "So did I. But maybe he didn't leave us. Maybe he just taught us how to stay with ourselves." The novice tilted his head. "What do you carry now?" June closed his eyes. "Not weight, not guilt, just stories and seeds." The novice smiled faintly. "Then it's time we start planting." And June agreed. The next morning, June helped till soil at the temple's garden. His hands were blistered, shirt soaked in sweat, but he smiled. A young girl approached, no older than 7. She held a wilted plant. "Can this still grow?" she asked. June crouched beside her. "Plants are like people," he said. "Some just need a different kind of care." Together, they dug a small hole. Gently, patiently, they placed the plant inside and watered it. "Will it live?" she whispered. June looked at her, then the soil. "Let's give it time. And see." The girl smiled, then skipped away. June sat there watching the sun catch on dew and green. The garden didn't just bloom, it breathed. Because sometimes, healing looked like helping something else grow. As evening fell, June walked home along the riverbank. The breeze danced through tall grass. He stopped to watch the water, its flow constant, quiet, unstoppable. His reflection shimmered back at him, older, steadier. "You did not become him," he said aloud. "But you forgave him." A single tear fell, not from sorrow but release. Behind him, footsteps approached. His brother. No words, just a smile. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder, watching the river roll. "It's strange," his brother said. "We used to come here and pretend to be warriors." June chuckled. "Now we fight for peace." His brother nodded. "And this time, we're winning." Together, they stayed until stars emerged. 2 brothers, no longer broken, just human. Whole. June sat on the school rooftop one morning, legs dangling over the edge, journal in his lap. Below, students arrived in waves, laughing, shouting, running late. He had once envied their lightness, the absence of heaviness in their eyes. But now he didn't envy. He observed. And he understood. Everyone carried something. Some just carried it quietly. He flipped open his journal and wrote, "The pain didn't begin with me, but the healing, maybe it does." For the first time, he didn't write to escape. He wrote to witness. Not just his story, but everyone's. Because stories weren't meant to be locked in notebooks or silenced in bones. They were meant to be shared. And if even one person found their voice because he dared to speak, then none of it was wasted. None of it. That afternoon, June was invited to a village gathering. No speeches, no ceremonies, just food, music, and people being together. He sat with elders who told stories of their youth, and with children who asked strange, beautiful questions. One boy asked, "Do you believe in magic?" June smiled. "I used to think it was something outside me. Now I think it's what happens when you heal something no one sees." The boy thought hard and said, "Like when mom stops crying in the kitchen and starts singing again." June's heart caught. Exactly like that. That night, as lanterns floated up into the sky, June didn't feel like a man who'd been broken. He felt like someone who had learned to build. From ruin. From silence. From grace. A few days later, June received a letter. No return address. Just his name, handwritten in faded ink. Inside, a page torn from his father's notebook. "I hope one day you understand that I stayed silent, not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't know how to say it without breaking. June read it 3 times. Not because he needed to believe it, but because he finally could. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his new journal, not to preserve the past, but to honor it. Then he whispered to the air, "I understand now." And it wasn't dramatic or thunderous. It was quiet, like a lock turning gently open. And behind that door, peace. Undeniable. Earned. That evening, June visited the monk's resting tree one last time. The branches stretched high into a sky painted in gold and lavender. He sat beneath it and closed his eyes. The wind wrapped around him like a robe, rustling leaves like whispered prayers. In the silence, June remembered it all. The alley, the collapse, the hand on his wrist. He whispered, "I didn't understand then, but I do now." No voice replied. No vision. Just stillness. But in that stillness there was presence. Not absence. He opened his eyes and stood. No longer bowed. No longer burdened. "I forgive you," he said, not just to the monk, not just to his father, but to himself. And the wind answered with soft movement through the leaves. Years later, a child asked June, now older, now gentle, what was the most important thing you ever learned? He thought for a long while, then replied, that we don't always get to choose what wounds us, but we always choose what we do with the wound. The child asked, "So, did you heal?" June looked out the window, watching sunlight spill over the hills. "I think healing is when the pain becomes a path, not a prison." The child frowned, then smiled. "That sounds like a story." June chuckled. "It is, and you'll write your own one day." The child asked, "How will I know what to carry?" June answered, voice low and certain, "You'll know when it doesn't break your back, but builds your spine."